All right, so here we are. It is January 24th. I'm speaking with Coleen Rowley in Minnesota. There's been another shooting and killing there by the ICE agents. And Coleen, I'd like you on the ground. First, please tell our listeners who you are. I did not properly introduce you. Why should they listen to you?
Yeah, I'm a retired FBI agent, but also I was the former legal division counsel in the Minneapolis office for 13 years, the last latter 13 years of my career. I also became a whistleblower after 9/11, testified to the various official inquiries, the Senate Judiciary, the Department of Justice Inspector General, led to some of the 9/11 Commission, and many findings that 9/11 could have been prevented. And then even after that, New York Times made me one of the Time Persons of the Year for 2002. The most importantly, I taught the use of deadly force as part of teaching constitutional law to FBI agents and to police officers in Minnesota for 13 years, whatever. So today, unfortunately, our Minnesota governor, Walz, just called it sickening, and I would totally agree. The third ICE shooting, first it was a beating and then a shooting of a man, a white male, 37 years old, who is, turns out they've identified him as an ICU nurse. He was helping a woman, apparently, who had been hit in the face, either with chemical or something, at one of these ICE raids where he is an observer. And they all, it looks like from the videos, 4 or 5 of them jumped on him and started fighting. He was, of course, struggling back. And the videos now show that his hands were not on a gun or anything. You can see both of his bare hands, and they shot him dead. Right.
I want to go back to something which I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on, but years ago after the Columbine shooting, Lyndon LaRouche wrote a paper called Star Wars and Littleton. And he said, how are our kids being turned into killers? He said there's 2 requisites. One is dehumanization. The reason he used Star Wars is he said you have these characters that are half man, half android, half something or other. So you're destroying the idea of man. And then he said the other factor is arbitrary rules where you make up, like they did with Squid Games, red light, green light. Oh, you didn't make the rules. Our rules say you get executed. So you have this dehumanization and then arbitrary use of execution is mandated under this. And we now see an out of control, pattern of this. My understanding is that these people also are not trained. You have military people coming back with PTSD. I heard, I don't know if it's true, that they get 47 days of training because Trump is the 47th president or some. So please shed some light on this, and please tell us what other lies have been told about this situation, and not just this particular shooting, the Renee Good case, the other cases as well.
Well, I think you pretty much described the problem and the root causes of the problem. There is extreme dehumanization. And this goes back to the campaign promise. They scapegoated the so-called illegal immigrants. And that is a way of dehumanizing people, whatever. In Minnesota, people resisted that notion that these were dehumanized illegal immigrants, and people became legal observers, which is under their rights. They can go and with their cell phones, and thank goodness people did that, because otherwise there would be no evidence or proof. In Minnesota, and people remember George Floyd killing a few years ago. And if it hadn't been for those videotapes, there would have been very little evidence of what happened. After and right at the same time, our police in Minnesota are mandated to have body cameras. They're mandated to have their body cameras on because of the problems of bad, unjustified shootings and violence. Now, the ICE people don't have body cameras. And so because of that,
the guy who shot Renee Good was filming with his cell phone? Because that was so bizarre. If you're what are you doing holding anything in your hands other than being prepared to deal with whatever situation you're in?
That's right.
Please say something about the training, since you know the law and you were involved in this. What is the proper procedure? Because I don't know anything about the law, I'll just say, but it seems to me it is not legal to shoot someone because they're fleeing, for example, or shoot them.
Not.
Don't obey your order. Could you just clarify what the law is?
Yeah, the most concise. Now, I'm not a forensic or ballistics expert. I am not. They have expert witnesses that testify in cases of deadly force. However, I did teach the legal use of deadly force for 13 years. And in a very concise way, basically, you have to be in shooting, have a reasonable belief that you are defending yourself, that you are being threatened with deadly force yourself, or an innocent party is being threatened with deadly force. And that's the shortest way of looking at this. Now, the factors that go into evaluating whether a shooting is justified or not actually encompass things that precede the actual shooting. So, for instance, in the Renee Good case, the fact that the ICE officer is standing in front of a car, which is not part of, that's a very dumb thing because the car could move and hit you. And then the deadly force policy does also say that you're not to shoot into a moving vehicle. And the reason for that is because the vehicle itself is a weapon and could hurt other people. There's a good reason for that part. Now, in the case of this case today, which, normally this is a very key thing, and our governor just announced that this is completely wrong. Then our news followed up and they had it wrong. It's very frustrating to hear these things. Normally, we have expert investigators that investigate almost all, if not all, deadly force incidents. And they are not the FBI. They're not ICE investigating themselves. It normally is the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And the reason for that, when I said I'm not a forensic or ballistic expert, they are. They have literally investigated dozens, if not hundreds, of these deadly force incidents. Not the FBI, by the way. Right. It is always the Minnesota. In this case, when Renee Good was shot, initially they thought, okay, well, the FBI will investigate with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension together, and they share interviews and things like that. But after a very short, maybe a few hours, the feds said, no, we're not investigating our ICE agent. We are investigating the victims of the shooting. And when that happened, and they said it's not a civil rights investigation that would be looking at whether it was a justified or unjustified shooting by the ICE officer. When that happened, 6 of our criminal prosecutors, the top career prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office, including the former acting U.S. Attorney. And this was the guy that was the career, expert, and he even prosecuted the Somalian frauds. They resigned in protest. And the reason that these 6 resigned in protest is because this is so off the charts. This is what the news people, of course, they don't know these things and they didn't understand this and they just misreported it. It just drives me crazy. On top of the 6 prosecutors that basically walked out, they said, this is wrong. We aren't going to investigate the victims. This should be, the BCA should be the ones investigating it. Then, just a couple of days ago, the acting supervisor in the FBI, she's a female. I don't know her, of course, because I retired way back in 2004, but she resigned in protest because this should have been a civil rights. People I've heard, I don't know how many, and I don't know the specifics, but I've also heard people in the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division have resigned in protest. Now, the reason they're resigning, it's not because this is a he said, she said, or this is even equivocal. No, this is completely wrong. The Bureau of Criminal Apprehension needs to be the main investigators because they're the experts. And you can't just go because I says, no, we're
Right.
Donald Trump, and I'm going to add this part. Donald Trump has apparently, which you said before, green lighted the shootings by ICE and beatings and other use of violence. He has apparently told them, who knows why, it's like his, we got to take over Venezuela and Greenland and Canada, and it's the same type of megalomania. But so the people here on the ground who most of them only have a few days of training. They aren't necessarily long time people. The shooter of Renee Good did have a long time in. He had about 15 or more years, and he was a SWAT and firearms and everything. So he's not like the new one.
My question about him is if he has a policy of standing in front of cars, because he was involved in another incident with a vehicle where he was dragged apparently, and maybe that wasn't his fault. Maybe he was just traumatized. I don't know, but it does seem, I don't know if I got, anyway, I'm sorry. If I had an issue with the car before, I stand in front of a car again.
That's right. Reaching your arm into a window when there's a suspect in there is very dangerous. And law enforcement officers, it's not uncommon for them to be dragged. Standing in front of a car with somebody in front of it and, whatever, is also very dangerous. And that would be, again, this should be something that should go to a jury. And there are forensic and ballistic experts, people who have investigated dozens of shootings. They would be expert witnesses. And yes, it's possible that they could even disagree about things, but it should go.
Because I want to make sure our listeners are clear, because the point of these resignations, if I'm understanding you correctly, is not even that people say, we know who did it. They're saying the wrong agency is investigating. You have people who are experts. If you're going to do an investigation, have the people who are experts do the investigation. So it's not over a foregone conclusion.
That's exactly right. The problem is the foregone conclusions in these cases. And I'm going to add the deceit. Because every one of these shootings, and there's been 3, the middle one, they didn't kill the immigrant that they shot in the legs, but there were apparently lies about whether they were fighting back with shovels or something. And so the first one, there was all kinds of misinformation put out about, first Donald Trump said that the ICE agent had been run over. Then there was continuing misinformation about it. The one today, ICE has refused to answer whether the victim was brandishing a weapon. So he was asked, the head of the Border Patrol, who is the main lead guy here, Buvino is his last name, and he was asked that. The video shows the victim's hands, and there's no gun in his hands. He's on the ground, and then what happens is that based on that preliminary evidence, including the videos, including any eyewitness statements, etc., including if a gun is found, all of those things are at least evaluated quickly. Then you have a much more detailed exhaustive investigation, normally done by, again, in Minnesota, it's by the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And I will say, that's pretty much the same procedure in every state. The people who are experts at investigating will tend to be your state entities, not the feds. And there's a lot of reasons for, they have a lot more law enforcement shootings. Normally, the shooter or the possible shooter are put on administrative leave while this later investigation is taking place. Then it goes to a prosecutor. It can go, by the way, to a federal prosecutor, but it could also go to a state or county prosecutor. And then they decide, is there enough evidence to warrant charges and prosecution? If a state officer is charged by, if a federal officer is charged by the state, and by the way, this happened in an FBI case years ago at Ruby Ridge, where the FBI agent was given wrongful orders and ended up shooting. He was told he could shoot any armed male, which, is not right. As I just said, that's not the deadly force policy. And he was given that order. It was covered up for a long time that this order came out. The county prosecutor charged the FBI agent. And that can happen in a case like this where, he shot a woman and he was a sniper and, he couldn't have done that. It later got dropped, but that's what the law is. Then here's the most important thing. It goes, our system, our justice system is not a president saying, there's no such thing as an unlawful order when I give the orders. That's why they went after the 5 or 6 senators who said, don't follow unlawful orders. And then the Trump administration, some of the people surrounding Trump said, no, we go after you. If you say don't follow unlawful orders, Mark Kelly, we will take away some of your pension. It will court-martial you. Because their notion is that there's no such thing as law. And Stephen Miller, one of the national security advisors, has said this. And so, unfortunately, there is law. I mean, I wouldn't say unfortunately. Fortunately, we have law. Now, the president doesn't think, he thinks if he gives the order that it just turns everything lawful. And perhaps some of the people in ICE, I would think that there are even good federal officers. And that's, frankly, I think that's why the FBI acting supervisor walked out, because she knows that it can't be somebody giving you an unlawful order and saying, oh, well, President Trump has our backs, we can shoot people, at will or wanton. So, yeah, we're in a war zone in Minnesota right now. Governor Walz just now, to his credit, and by the way, I'm not a tremendous fan of Governor Walz for a lot of reasons, but in this case, he did a good job, and he said, our Minnesota BCA is investigating. And it looks to me like it's kind of a standoff right now, because the feds are saying, get out of here, Walz. We have supremacy, and you can't order your BCA to investigate. But that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. Normally, this is never a problem. The two of them can investigate jointly, share information. It's happened many, many times. I have never heard of a standoff like this. Even in Ruby Ridge, even in the FBI's, I would say, questionable, wrongful sniper shooting of Weaver's wife at Ruby Ridge, it didn't turn into a standoff. The FBI tried to defend the sniper who had shot the woman, but they didn't say, get out of here to the local authorities. And now this is what's happening here. Right.
All right. I think you have to run, but I wanted to thank you so much for giving me these few minutes, and we'll get this much out, and perhaps you and I can talk again very soon about all of this. And about about it.
I think your description, by the way, you have a very good understanding The desensitization to violence plays a role as well. And that
Yeah.
has been used as a recruiting tool for the military. You're right. Some of these ICE agents are former military. So there's the dehumanization of people, including protesters in Minnesota. They call them insurrectionists and domestic terrorists, the desensitization to violence. And then, this notion that you get an unlawful order, you have to follow it, which is completely wrong.
Right, exactly. All right, well, thank you so much, and we will talk soon.